to start, let's introduce myself. So my name is Iliana Quinonez. I lead the customer engineering team at Google Cloud in the North America region for startups. So if you are wondering about what customer engineering means, that means my team includes all the engineers that support the startup founders in their journey to adopt our technology, implement it, deploy it. If they get stuck with something, my team are the ones who are going to be helping those founders. So for all those founders that are here in the room today, all those developers that work with our technology, thank you so much for your partnership, for using it, for providing feedback. So really appreciate that. So with that said, let me tell you what we're going to cover today. And while it looks like it's a lot of topics, I promise it's not going to be like draining or anything. So we'll talk a little bit about the shift in terms of the AI market and where we are with that. So what's the revolution that we're living through at this particular point in time? Then we're going to talk also about the size of the market and how is that looking in the next few years and why that's important. We're also going to cover some of the categories, the different types of AI agents that we're seeing today, but also where we think the market is going as well. And then we're going to wrap up with a couple of points that are important to keep in mind if you are already developing agents or are thinking about developing agents and what's important for you to pay attention to. Okay? So that's what we're going to cover today. But before we get to the first one, let me make you think about two numbers. Actually, let's keep it down to one number. The number is 82. Okay? Some of you may like the number. I like 82. But why is that number important? 82 represents a percentage that, according to a recent study by Capgemini, is the number or the percentage of organizations today that are planning on using or integrating AI agents into their companies within the next 1 to 3 years. If someone is wondering, what's the percentage today? That is about 10% only. So think about the growing from 10 to 82% within the next 1 to 3 years. So this is a very exciting area, and it's definitely an area of growth. And why do we think that, or why do we say that we are going through a revolution? Because we're basically in the middle of a shift. We're shifting from having AI agents that have been pretty easy to use in the past. They do very specific tasks very well. But we're now moving to those agents that are more autonomous in nature, can understand their environment better, and can act and make decisions. So that's the difference, and that's why we're calling it an AI revolution, because we're shifting towards that. So in essence, we're moving from what we could call more passive software, passive AI agents, to more proactive, more intelligent systems. And some of the tasks that these AI agents can do, you can see on the screen, some of them are going to be very complex tasks and workflows and things that happen in different environments, different industries. We're also going to have creation of novel business models. So think about, when we think about companies like Waymo and self-driving cars, that's a completely new business model. Those didn't exist before. It's a new revenue stream for companies. So a lot of the new revolution that we're going to see is going to create not just new ways of agents helping us do things, but it's going to even also create new business models and maybe even new industries out there. And then, of course, we are seeing the delivery of hyper-personalized experiences as well. Just think about those agents that are out there to make our lives easier when we're shopping something, when we're customer servicing something, either on the side of the companies or on the side of the consumers. So those are going to be hyper-personalized experiences. And all this is basically just an indication of where the market is going within the next few years. So there are several studies out there, so this is not the only one, but all of them pretty much use very similar numbers. So today, the market is about $5 billion, according to many analysts. But the projection, and what's more important than that, is the CAGR. So what's the compounded annual growth rate for the AI agent market today and within the next 10 years? It's between 40 and 50%. And think about it. That's a very, very big number. Just to put it into context, everybody's familiar with the cloud industry, obviously. So cloud industry is planned or projected to grow at about 16 to 21% CAGR for the same period of time. And let's take another industry, CRM. For instance, companies like Salesforce in that space, they grow at about 12 to 16% in the next few years as well. So those growth rates are pretty amazing when you think about it. It's really a fast acceleration of this industry. And while the number in terms of the dollar amount is obviously not the same as the cloud market, the compounded growth rate really tells us that this industry is booming, and we're still in the early stages. Now, as part of that, there are some trends that we're seeing. So if you're already familiar with agents, some of these trends will sound familiar to you. If you're not super familiar yet, some of these will be in your vocabulary pretty soon. Some things like multimodal AI agents. So think about moving from not just having text, but also having video, having images as inputs to these models, and to creating the prompts and manipulating prompts or creating the agents themselves. So that's a multimodality that we call it. There are other trends like edge AI deployment. Edge refers to the fact that some of these agents that we're creating, because of the models that they are based on, depend a lot on the cloud. But there are certainly some industries that cannot afford that cloud connectivity all the time, especially, for instance, some what's called smart factory in the manufacturing space. So what edge deployment does is it brings the deployment of those agents into the devices that those smart factories use. So that's an example of edge deployment. And then we have other things that are coming out too very strongly, and you probably have heard them. So ethical AI, explainability is there too, transparency. So the need to really have agents and models that are going to be mitigating the biases, that are going to be trusted systems for people to use more to increase the adoption that they have. And then synthetic data is another one that I want to highlight. There's a lot of agents in specific industries, for instance, robotic agents, where it's very costly to train those agents and those models with real-life data. Imagine a big robot moving around the world and having all that data. It's very costly to have it. If the robot falls and then, of course, destroys some of the environment around it, that's going to be costly. So synthetic data is being used, and it's generated artificially, but it's being used in those models or developing those agents where the data that they need to be trained or to operate, it's either very costly or very sensitive. Okay, so those are other areas that are developing as well. Now, in terms of the trends that we're seeing, it's not just those in general. There are some specific ones that we have around the development of the agents. So in that part of the ecosystem, we have some of them that are related to development kits. So if you have heard about the ADKs, of course, I'm from Google, so I'm going to say Google ADK, but we're not the only one. You have LangChain out there, you have Bedrock from AWS, you have something from Microsoft as well, and others. So that is one thing that's developing really fast, and I would encourage you all to obviously try those, and of course, may the best one win. Or you will end up working with several of them, which is the other big trend that we're seeing. People are actually getting to use different models, different ADKs all the time. The second thing is the protocols, so agent-to-agent protocols. These are open source projects that are helping us be more consistent in the way that agents collaborate or communicate with each other. Now, very important, some of you may have heard about something called MCP, so Model Complex Protocol. That is not to be confused with agent-to-agent protocol. So the difference between those two, and forgive me if some of you already know this, but just to level set everybody too, agent-to-agent protocol is going to help us provide the guidelines and the consistency on how different agents talk to each other. The MCP is going to help us in terms of guidance and consistency on how agents communicate with tools or with data sources that they need to bring to the table to perform certain actions. So one is between agents, and MCP is from the agent to the different sources or tooling that they may require to use. We also have marketplaces. So think about this. The market is exploding. There's a lot of people getting into this space. There will be, and there are already, several marketplace platforms for agents, where companies and developers can go and check what's the latest out there in a particular industry. They can get these agents. They can buy them, adopt them, subscribe to them, license them. So it is a new business model in the space. So if you are in a startup who is thinking about, is this a good space for me? I would say absolutely, but you need to be aware of how things are moving, and they are moving really fast. So if you're developing agents, start thinking about those go-to-market ideas. How are you going to license them? How are you going to price them? And know that there will be platforms where you can actually leverage all that. You don't have to build it all, okay? Then the last two things that are happening in the ecosystem too. One is trust and explainability that I covered in my previous slide, but the other one is the verticalization. So we're seeing now that people are focused on really going to specific industries. So if you're building agents, of course you can build agents that are more for horizontal use, and there's a lot of them, for instance, examples in the development space, companies that are developing agents on that side, like Codium and Cursor and Lovable and all of them, and they are doing a great job. But there are also a lot of companies that are focusing on specific niche areas. We're seeing a lot of activity today in healthcare. We're also seeing activity in financial services, especially agents around fraud detection, risk management, trading. In the health industry, there's a lot of things going on, as you can probably imagine, but there's a lot of things related to patient triage, medical record analysis. There's also, in the legal industry, a lot of contract analysis, due diligence, litigation support, so very specific use cases, depending on the vertical industry that we're talking about. But this is expanding. So while before it was 1 or 2 industries, right now we're seeing it across the board. So there's a lot of opportunity here, too. Now let's move on a little bit and talk, if not super technical, let's start thinking about the categories of agents that we can visualize. So some of them are going to be very natural for us because we're all familiar with them. Think about how we all started using bots even a few years ago. So we have a lot of chatbots that can be also considered agents. Some of them were basically built on very specific tasks. They were goal-oriented. They were supposed to just give us an answer. Conversational bots were the next step, obviously. Some of them were built upon very simple models. They were trained to give us an answer based on an FAQ document, for instance. So very simple agents is the first wave that we were thinking about. In customer service, that's where we saw a lot of that. But now fast forward a couple of years, and we're seeing a lot of them now that are across different industries, that are done for code and development purposes. And more importantly, we are seeing a change in agents being more complex. So we're really evolving the types of agents that we're building. So we can have simple reflex agents, which are, think about an easy example for that is a thermostat. It's an agent. Why? Because it just reacts to a condition. Temperature in the room gets below 70, turn the heating on. If it goes above 80, turn the heating off. So that's a simple reflex agent, a very simple example of that. But then we have model-based reflex agents that are the ones that not only react, but also have their internal models that they have to compare to the conditions outside to their internal model, and then make a decision and act upon that. Utility and goal-based agents are also important, and that's an interesting concept. So the difference is when you have a goal-based agent, is let's say that the goal is a chess agent, where the goal is to checkmate your opponent. The utility-based agent is going to be the one that says, yep, that is the goal, but I need to find the route that's the most optimized route, the most efficient way to get to that goal. So that's a utility-based agent, and it's obviously more complicated. And then we have the learning agents. And those agents are the ones that are going to have the ability to have a learning model, the ability to react to that, take the output of those decisions, and feed back into their models. They also have memory. So they are more complex agents as well. But as you can see, we're talking about, yes, a revolution, but also an evolution of all the things that we can do with these models. And the tools that are available, the ADKs, all the things that are coming out, and the things that are still going to be coming out, you're going to see developments in these areas. And again, this is important to keep in mind as you consider your own journey through developing agents. Furthermore, if we think about, well, what's even beyond that, right? What's even beyond the simple agents? So that's the multi-agent systems. And that's where we are seeing a lot in research institutions. We're seeing it a lot in startups. A lot of startups are really tinkering with this right now. There are different types of multi-agent systems, but the main ones that we're seeing in the startups ecosystem are these 3 ones. So multi-agents that are collaborative in nature, and let's talk about an example of that. Think about a disaster zone, right? An area war zone, or after a fire. So a lot of, let's say we have a system of drones that are agent-based. So the drones are going to go there. They are going to capture information real time. They are going to collaborate with each other, providing information with the goal to create, for instance, a comprehensive map of the area. So that's a multi-agent collaborative system. So you have the multiple agents collaborating between each other, capturing information real time, making a decision to achieve the goal of creating that map. So that's one example. Let's think about the second category, hierarchical multi-agent systems. That, for instance, is if you have a factory, and this is not to replace all labor, because that's another thing that happens. People ask, well, are these agents going to replace all these factory workers or factory actions or labor? Well, the answer is no. Remember, the whole point of having agents or having technology is that these are tools that should be in the use, in the benefit for the human experience. So that's something super important to keep. And of course, this session is not focused on that particular topic, but it's always good to remember. Agents are good, but they are only technology, and they should serve for the benefit of the human experience too. So with that said, so the factory example that I wanted to share with you for a multi-agent system that's hierarchical is, think about, you have a factory manager agent who then works with factory worker agents that are controlling individual machines. So from the top, there are instructions, there are different workflows that are kicked off from the top to the workers to then taking action with the specific machines. And then based on those outcomes and results, then information flows back up to report on that. So that's a hierarchical multi-agent system. And then the last category is, of course, the adaptive and autonomous multi-agent systems. And this one, we could probably all be very familiar with. Think about a fleet of self-driving delivery vehicles. Those self-driving vehicles have a lot of agents in them. They can relate to their environment. They can take the information from the environment real time. They can check on the road conditions. They can check on maybe accidents that are happening. And they can communicate with each other while still making decisions individually. So they share the information. Maybe they adjust the delivery loads or the delivery routes for specific purposes. So they still act individually for their own, but they can share the information with the rest of the fleet. And they can be adjusting and they can be learning together as part of the system. So that's another area that's super important. That's going to be really in big delivery effort in the next few years, too. Now, when we think about agents, regardless of which ones you're thinking, simple agents, single agents, multi-agent systems, it's important to think that these are software applications. These are systems that we have to develop. And as with any software application, the development cycle is usually pretty standard. It starts with, what's the goal for this? What are we trying to build and why? Very important. To then selecting, in the case of agents, what are the models that we can use and leverage? Because, by the way, we should not develop everything from scratch. So what are the tools that are available for us? To then evaluating the agent frameworks and the development kits that we have at our disposal, creating or determining the integration needs for those systems, and then, of course, planning the testing, the deployment, the implementation. And I think that's a pretty standard development process. Hope you agree with that. But what's important to know is that based on the experience we have had and we have seen, there are several pitfalls that you can experience while going through this journey. There are three in particular that I would like to kind of put out there so that you can evaluate and pay attention to them, maybe a little bit more than the others. One is, we're still seeing hallucinations a lot. So while we would like to say that those are gone, they are not gone, so they are still happening. So during your development cycle, keep in mind things that you can do to reduce hallucinations to the minimum. The second one is security vulnerabilities. So very important to see what you can do to prevent the influence of bad actors into the system. And the third one is an area that you're familiar with, human in the loop. So the agent systems, of course, are very autonomous, very automatic, right? Very automated. But humans are important. So we need to consider where are the points in the system, in the development cycle, that we need to include that human in the loop to make sure that all the different conditions are accounted for, and where things really, really do matter, we need to have that human example. Okay? So that's the development cycle, and those are just some of the challenges that I'd like you to probably consider and keep in mind. And then in closing, let me tell you, if you're starting in this space, what's the best way to get into this space? Focus on a niche problem, high-value problem, and try to solve it with these agents. That's one of the first things. Then don't start from scratch, so definitely use all the tools at your disposal. And of course, the ethical considerations is something you need to keep in mind. But if you're on the other side and you're already building agents, and you are very familiar with this environment, how are you going to achieve competitive differentiation? The best way to do that is become an industry expert. So deep expertise in the industry area or in the problem area that you want to build these systems for. That's probably number one. The second thing is, of course, the human-agent collaboration. Because for as much as we want, we're going to be able to automate a lot of things, but some of them will still require the human participation. So think about what's the best way, what's your answer, your strategy for that human-agent collaboration. And then, of course, make sure that you build your explainability into it, because that's the only way you're going to get trust in your systems and trust by your customers. And there's a lot of tools and frameworks that are coming out there, so keep an eye on them. And last but not least, ground yourself and your decisions on data. That's the best way. That's what foundational models do. They ground themselves on data. But sometimes, remember, data is changing. We have real-life data. We have synthetic data. And in the future, we're going to have even other kinds of data out there. So mind yourself, be grounded, and good luck in your journeys, guys. Hope you learned something new here today. Thank you.